The wheelchair squeaked against Milano's marble floor, announcing my arrival like a carnival attraction. I should have known better. 40 years of Patricia's poison should have taught me that when your stepmother suddenly plays matchmaker, you're not the bride, you're the punchline. Chad's face said it all. Disgust wrapped in a polo shirt. I specifically said I wanted someone normal, he announced to the entire dining room. What is this? Some kind of sick prank? Normal. The word everyone thinks but nobody says. Until now. Patricia had orchestrated this perfectly public degradation. Crowd of witnesses, no escape route. I was turning to leave when everything changed. There you are, sweetheart. Sorry I'm late. The stranger's hand touched my shoulder like he owned me. I looked up at a face that could launch war's silver-touched hair, brutal elegance, eyes that promised violence and protection in equal measure. He was lying. Obviously lying, but his lie just saved my life. The stranger pulled out Chad's chair before Chad could process what was happening. It wasn't a request. It was a dismissal wrapped in expensive cologne and quiet menace. I believe you were just leaving, the man said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that didn't need volume. Chad's face cycled through confusion, indignation, then something that looked uncomfortably like fear. He glanced at the stranger's face, and whatever he saw there made him grab his jacket. This is insane. You can't just... I can. 2 words. The stranger didn't even look at him. His eyes stayed on Gina, warm in a way that made her chest constrict. And I am. Chad left. Practically ran. Actually, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste to escape. The surrounding tables pretended not to watch while absolutely watching. Gina sat frozen, her brain trying to catch up with the last 60 seconds of her life. The stranger settled into Chad's abandoned seat with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. Up close, he was even more devastating, the kind of handsome that should come with a warning label. Sharp jaw, expensive haircut, a small scar above his left eyebrow that somehow made him more attractive instead of less. You didn't have to do that, Gina whispered, and she hated how her voice shook. She was 40 years old, not some damsel who needed rescuing, except apparently she was exactly that. I know, he said, and his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. But I'm starving, and I hate eating alone. Humor me? Gina blinked. You can't be serious. Why not? He picked up the menu like this was completely normal, like he crashed blind dates and claimed random wheelchair-bound women every Tuesday. The risotto here is exceptional. Have you been before? I know. I can't afford places like this. The honesty escaped before she could stop it. God. She was making this worse. Look, this is very kind, but you don't have to pity. Pity. He looked genuinely offended. Is that what you think this is? Isn't it? He leaned forward, and Gina caught the scent of something expensive and masculine. That man humiliated you in front of a room full of strangers. I intervened because I don't tolerate cruelty, and because, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because you held your head up even when your eyes were filling with tears. That's not weakness. That's strength. And I don't pity strength. Gina's throat closed for an entirely different reason now. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know what to do with kindness that came without conditions attached. The waiter appeared, practically vibrating with nervous energy. Mr. Bianco, sir. Your usual table in the private room is... I'll be staying here, Vincent. 2 menus, please. Vincent's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded and disappeared. Mr. Bianco, Gina repeated slowly. The name tickled something in her memory, but she couldn't place it. Should I know you? Something flickered across his face. Surprise? Maybe? Relief? Brian. And no, there's no reason you should. He extended his hand across the table. Though I should probably know your name if we're having dinner together. Gina. She shook his hand, and his grip was warm and solid. Gina Campbell. And we're not having dinner together. You're having dinner. I'm having a minor mental breakdown. He laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was rich and unexpected. Well, Gina Campbell, would you consider having your mental breakdown over pasta? It's much better than having it in an empty apartment. Trust me on this. Despite everything, despite the humiliation still burning in her cheeks, and the certainty that this was some kind of elaborate joke, Gina felt her lips twitch. Speaking from experience? Unfortunately, yes. He flagged down Vincent. We'll start with the bruschetta. 2 orders of the mushroom risotto, And bring us your best wine, something that pairs well with catastrophically bad blind dates. Vincent nodded solemnly. An excellent choice, sir. When they were alone again, Gina shook her head. This is surreal. You know that, right? This whole situation is completely insane. Agreed. But you're still here. Because I'm in shock. Or because you're hungry. His eyes crinkled at the corners. It's okay to be both. The wine arrived, and Brian poured with practiced ease. Gina accepted the glass, still half convinced she'd wake up and discover this was an elaborate dream brought on by expired yogurt. So, Brian said, settling back in his chair. Tell me about the man who was stupid enough to walk away from you. You mean Chad, the real estate champion? Gina took a sip of wine. God, it was good. That wasn't a date. That was my stepmother's idea of entertainment. Your stepmother set you up to be humiliated? His voice went cold. Intentionally? Patricia's hobby is making sure I remember my place. Gina surprised herself with the bitterness in her voice, which is apparently beneath normal people. Her words, not mine. Well, also Chad's words. So I guess it's a popular sentiment. Your stepmother is watching us right now. It wasn't a question. Brian's gaze flicked toward the bar. Blonde woman, green dress. Looks like she swallowed a lemon? Gina turned slightly and saw Patricia. Her face twisted in an expression somewhere between fury and disbelief. That's her. How did you? She's been staring daggers at our table since I sat down. I'm guessing this isn't going according to her plan? No, Gina said slowly, feeling something dangerous bloom in her chest. Something that felt suspiciously like satisfaction. No, it's definitely not. Good, Brian raised his glass. To ruining terrible people's terrible plans. Gina clinked her glass against his, and for the first time all evening, she smiled. Really smiled. The food arrived, and somehow conversation flowed like they'd known each other for years instead of minutes. Brian asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He didn't do that thing people usually did, that performative interest that was really just waiting for their turn to talk. When Gina mentioned her accounting job, he asked about the work itself, not whether it was hard to do from a wheelchair. I'm not very good at it, honestly, Gina admitted, surprising herself with the confession. I'm methodical and detail-oriented, which makes me adequate. But I'm saving up for something that matters more, which is surgery. There's a procedure that might restore some function to my legs. It's expensive, and insurance won't cover it because it's considered experimental. But she stopped, realizing she was oversharing. Sorry, you probably don't want to hear about my medical history over risotto, I asked, didn't I? Brian's expression was serious. How long have you been saving? 6 years. I'm about halfway there. She took another bite of risotto, which was indeed exceptional. At this rate, I'll be able to afford it by the time I'm 50. Which is either optimistic or delusional, depending on how you look at it. I'd say determined. You're very good at this, Gina said suddenly. At what? Making someone who was just publicly destroyed feel like a human being again. She met his eyes. Is this what you do? Rescue pathetic women from bad dates? You're not pathetic. And no, this is a first for me. He leaned forward. Want to know the truth? Always. I was in the private room closing a business deal, stepped out for air and saw the whole thing. I was going to intervene anyway. I don't like bullies, but then I saw your face. He paused. You weren't crying. You should have been. But you weren't. You just looked tired, like this was one more thing in a long line of things, and you'd survive this too. Gina's chest tightened. That's very observant for a stranger. I notice things. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, and silenced it. My associates are wondering where I disappeared to. You should get back to them. I've monopolized enough of your evening. You haven't monopolized anything. I chose this. He signaled for the check, and when Vincent brought it, he handed over a black card without looking at the total. Besides, my associates can wait. They're used to it. What kind of business are you in? Gina asked, then immediately regretted it when something shuddered behind his eyes. Import-export. Very boring. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes this time. Lots of paperwork and meetings with tedious people. It was a lie. Gina didn't know how she knew, but she did. Still, everyone was entitled to their secrets. God knew she had enough of her own. Outside the restaurant, the evening air was cool and welcome after the warmth inside. Brian walked her to her car, a beat-up sedan with hand controls Patricia had bought her years ago. probably because it was the cheapest option available. "Thank you," Gina said, meaning it. "For the rescue, and dinner, and the reminder that not everyone in the world is terrible. Some of us are just selectively terrible." Brian pulled out his phone. "Can I have your number?" Gina laughed, actually laughed. "Why? So can you add me to your collection of charity cases? So I can take you to dinner again. A real one this time, not an emergency intervention." His eyes were sincere. "I'd like to see you again, Gina Campbell. If you'll let me." She should say no. This man was clearly out of her league in every possible way. This was probably some kind of rich person whim that would evaporate by morning. But God, when was the last time someone had looked at her like she mattered? She gave him her number. Brian entered it into his phone and immediately called it so she'd have his. "I'll text you tomorrow." "Sure you will," Gina said, not believing it for a second. He helped her into her car with surprising gentleness, making sure her wheelchair was secured in the back. Then he leaned down, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes. "I keep my promises, Gina. Remember that." She drove away, watching him disappear in her rearview mirror. Her phone buzzed before she'd made it 2 blocks. "Brian. Already breaking my promise. Couldn't wait until tomorrow. That wasn't pity tonight. That was interest. Sleep well." Gina stared at the message, something warm and terrifying unfurling in her chest. Across town, Patricia was probably seething. The thought made Gina smile all the way home. She had no idea that the man who'd rescued her was both more dangerous and more honorable than she could possibly imagine. Or that her stepmother's jealousy was about to turn truly toxic. For now, for one perfect night, Gina Campbell let herself believe in impossible things. She was going to regret that, but not yet. Be honest, would you have given Brian your number after what just happened? Please let me know in the comments below and kindly hit the subscribe as the story unravels. Thank you. Brian called at 8 the next morning. Gina stared at her phone like it had sprouted wings. She'd been awake since 6, telling herself that last night was a fever dream brought on by humiliation and expensive wine. Men who looked like Brian Bianco didn't follow through. They just didn't. "Did I wake you?" His voice was warm, slightly amused, like he knew exactly what she'd been thinking. "No, Gina sat up in bed, suddenly aware she was wearing a ratty t-shirt with a cartoon cat on it. Not that he could see her. "I thought you were joking about calling. I told you I keep my promises." She could hear traffic in the background. "What's your coffee order?" "My what?" "Coffee. The beverage that makes mornings survivable. What do you like?" "Brian, it's 8 a.m. on a Wednesday." "I'm aware. I'm also 15 minutes from your office with a carrier that's getting heavy. So unless you want me to guess, and I should warn you, my guessing track record is terrible, you should probably tell me." Gina gave him her order, her brain still trying to process that this was actually happening. She worked in a cramped office above a dry cleaner, doing bookkeeping for small businesses that could barely afford her modest rates. Men in $1,000 suits didn't show up there with coffee, except apparently, they did. Brian arrived wearing charcoal gray today, looking like he'd stepped out of a magazine spread titled, "Unfairly Attractive Men Who Ruin Your Concentration." Her coworker Denise actually dropped her stapler. "Gina Campbell?" He said it like he didn't already know, like this was a formal delivery. Then he winked, and her stomach did something acrobatic. "That's me." He handed her the coffee perfectly made, exactly how she liked it, and a pastry bag from the bakery she'd mentioned last night in passing. He'd been listening. Actually listening. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes, he said. "But I wanted to make sure you knew last night wasn't a fluke. You drove across town to bring me coffee." "I did." "That's insane." "Probably." His smile was devastating. "Dinner tomorrow? There's a new French place I've been wanting to try." Gina should have said no. Should have recognized this for what it was, too much, too fast, too good to be real. Instead, she heard herself say yes. Denise waited exactly 30 seconds after he left before rolling her chair over. "Who was that? And does he have a brother?" "I have no idea," Gina said honestly. "But I think I'm in trouble." The dates became a pattern. Brian showed up at her office 3 more times that week, with coffee and pastries, learning her schedule, her preferences, the fact that she had a weird obsession with true crime podcasts and hated cilantro with the passion of 1,000 suns. Their second real date was at a concert, a indie band Gina had mentioned loving in college. Brian had somehow gotten tickets to a sold-out show and arranged for accessible seating that didn't make her feel like an afterthought. He knew all the lyrics to their most popular song, which he absolutely shouldn't have. and sang off-key in her ear until she was laughing so hard she couldn't breathe. "You're terrible," she gasped. "I'm enthusiastic. There's a difference." Their third date was a cooking class where Brian proved to be aggressively incompetent with a knife and somehow set marinara sauce on fire. "This is why I eat out," he explained, waving away smoke while Gina doubled over laughing. "I'm a culinary disaster." "You're a culinary war crime," she corrected, and the way he looked at her like her laughter was the best thing he'd heard all week made her chest hurt in the best way. The fourth date ended in his car, rain drumming on the roof, the city lights blurred through wet windows. They'd been to dinner at a small Italian place where the owner had greeted Brian with the kind of deference usually reserved for royalty. Gina had noticed, filed it away with all the other small strange things. But then Brian had told her about his divorce 5 years ago. A woman who wanted the lifestyle but not the man, and she'd forgotten to be suspicious. "She wanted someone who'd be home for dinner," Brian said quietly. "Someone predictable. Safe. I'm not those things." "What are you?" Gina asked. "Complicated." He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Probably more trouble than you signed up for." "I didn't sign up for anything. You crashed my disaster of a blind date, remember? Best decision I've made in years." He reached over, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender, intimate. "Gina, I need you to know something." "That sounds ominous." "It's not. It's just..." He seemed to struggle for words, which was unlike him. "This isn't casual for me." "You're not casual for me." Her heart was trying to escape her chest. "We've known each other 2 weeks." "I know. Doesn't change anything." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Tell me if this is too much. Tell me if I need to slow down." She should. God, she should. Instead, Gina leaned forward and kissed him. Brian went still for half a second. Then his hand slid into her hair, and he kissed her back like she was oxygen and he was drowning. It was the kind of kiss that rewrote definitions, that made her forget about wheelchairs and disabilities and every single reason this was a terrible idea. His mouth was warm and demanding and perfect, and when they finally broke apart, Gina was shaking. "Why me?" she whispered against his lips. "You could have anyone. Anyone. Why would you want..." "I don't want anyone." Brian pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "I want you. The woman who makes jokes about wheeling and dealing, who listens to murder podcasts while doing taxes, who holds her head up even when the world is cruel. You, Gina. Just you." She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it scared her. "I'm 40 years old," she said. "I live in a studio apartment. I can't afford places like the ones you take me to. I can't even walk. I don't care about any of that." His voice was fierce. "Not one single part." "You should." "Well, I don't." He kissed her again, softer this time. "Get used to it." But there were cracks in the beautiful facade. Small things that didn't quite add up. The phone calls he took in another room, his voice dropping to a tone she couldn't quite hear. The way restaurant owners and shop workers treated him with nervous respect that went beyond good customer service. Once, she'd seen a man approach their table at dinner, lean down to whisper something, and Brian's entire demeanor had changed, gone cold and dangerous in a way that made her stomach clench. "Business," he'd said when she asked, but his smile hadn't reached his eyes. There was the expensive suits. The driver, a silent man named Leo, who appeared from nowhere whenever Brian needed him. The way Brian always seemed to know things, to have connections in places that didn't make sense for someone in import-export. Gina told herself she was being paranoid. That successful people had drivers and took business calls and knew restaurant owners. It didn't mean anything sinister, but a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, "Liar." Meanwhile, Patricia was conducting her own investigation. She'd watched from her car as Brian had shown up at Gina's pathetic office with coffee. Had seen them at that concert, her stepdaughter laughing like she had any right to joy. Had witnessed Brian looking at Gina like she was something precious instead of broken. It made Patricia's skin crawl. Made her want to scream. Gina was supposed to be miserable, dependent, grateful for whatever scraps Patricia threw her way. That was the natural order of things. That was justice for all the years Patricia had spent playing mother to someone else's child, trapped in a marriage to a man who'd loved his dead first wife more than his living second one. But this man who looked like he'd stepped off a movie screen, lavishing attention on her crippled stepdaughter? Unacceptable. Patricia hired a private investigator. Cost her more than she wanted to spend, but it would be worth it to wipe that smile off Gina's face. The report came back 3 weeks into Brian and Gina's relationship. Patricia read it twice, then a third time, her smile growing with each pass. Brian Bianco wasn't just wealthy. He was connected. To the Rossi family. To people who dealt in things that existed in shadows and ended up in police reports. The man courting her stepdaughter wasn't some legitimate businessman. He was a mafia. A criminal. Finally, she had the weapon she needed. Patricia tucked the folder into her purse and planned her strike. She'd wait for the perfect moment when Gina was most vulnerable, most in love, most convinced this fairy tale was real. Then she'd burn it all down. But Patricia didn't know that across town, Gina and Brian were having a very different conversation. They were in his penthouse the first time she'd seen where he lived. It was beautiful in that austere, expensive way that made her nervous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Furniture that looked like art installations. A kitchen he clearly never used. "This is where you live?" Gina had asked, wheeling through the massive space. "It's like a museum." "I know. It's terrible, isn't it?" Brian had smiled ruefully. "My ex-wife decorated it. I keep meaning to change it. But I'm never here long enough to care." Now they sat on his obscenely comfortable couch, Gina's wheelchair folded nearby, and Brian looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I want to talk to you about something," he said. Here it comes, Gina thought. The catch. The reveal. The moment he asks for whatever he's been building toward. "Your surgery," Brian continued. "You said you're halfway to affording it. How much do you need?" Gina blinked. "What?" "The procedure. How much more do you need to save?" "Brian, that's not... I can't ask you to..." "You're not asking. I'm offering." He took her hand. "I have money, Gina. Let me use it for something that matters." "That's insane. We've known each other for 3 weeks. 4, actually. And I don't care." His grip tightened. "I want to help. Please let me help." Gina's eyes burned. "Why? Why would you do this?" "Because I'm falling in love with you," Brian said simply. "And because you deserve to have choices. Whether you choose to walk or not, whether you choose to be with me or not, those should be your decisions, not limited by money." She was crying now, and couldn't help it. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it." He wiped her tears with his thumb. "Say you'll let me be part of your life. Say you'll trust me, even when it's scary." "It's terrifying," Gina admitted. "I know," Brian kissed her forehead. "But I'm not going anywhere. Get used to that too." She believed him. God help her, she believed every word. She had no idea that Patricia was already sharpening her knives, or that the man she was falling for was hiding secrets that would either destroy them or save them. For now, wrapped in Brian's arms in his sterile penthouse, Gina let herself believe in impossible things. The fall, when it came, would be devastating. 3 months. 92 days of waking up to good morning texts and falling asleep on video calls. Gina had stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop somewhere around week 6, when Brian had shown up at her apartment at 2 a.m. because she'd mentioned having insomnia, bringing chamomile tea and terrible rom-coms. "This is pathetic," she'd said, gesturing at the setup, her in pajamas, him still in his suit, both of them on her lumpy couch watching a movie about a baker who falls in love with a prince. "This is perfect," Brian had corrected, and kissed the top of her head. She'd started believing him. Started believing in all of it, the future he painted with such casual certainty, the way he talked about when you have the surgery, not if, the drawer he'd cleared for her things in his penthouse bathroom. She'd even met Leo properly, the silent driver who'd cracked a smile when Gina made a joke about Brian's terrible taste in music. "He's growing on you," Brian had said triumphantly. "Like a fungus," Leo had replied, deadpan, and Gina had laughed so hard she'd cried. That was yesterday. Yesterday, when her life still made sense. The knock came at 7 p.m. On a Thursday. Gina was getting ready for dinner with Brian. He'd promised to take her somewhere, disgustingly romantic, for their 3-month anniversary. She'd bought a new dress, deep blue, the kind that made her feel beautiful even sitting down. She opened the door expecting a delivery. Got Patricia instead. "Oh good, you're home." Patricia swept in without invitation, holding a manila folder like it was a trophy. She looked different, smug in a way that made Gina's stomach clench. "We need to talk about your boyfriend." "Patricia, I'm busy. Whatever this is, it's about Brian Bianco." Patricia settled onto Gina's couch, crossing her legs. Or should I say, Brian Bianco, of the Rossi crime family. The world tilted slightly. "What are you talking about?" I hired an investigator. Did my due diligence, which is more than you apparently did. Patricia opened the folder with theatrical slowness. Turns out your Prince Charming has some very interesting associations. The first photograph showed Brian entering a building Gina didn't recognize. Nothing incriminating about that. The second showed him with men in expensive suits, their faces hard and unfriendly. The third showed what looked like a cash exchange in a parking garage. Brian's face partially shadowed but unmistakably him. These could be anything, Gina said, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. Could be. Except the building is under FBI surveillance. Those men? Carlo Rossi, Vincent Marcello, and Thomas Chen, all with records involving illegal items and associated activities. And that money? Patricia's smile was poison. Well, that's just Brian conducting business. Gina's hands started shaking. Why are you doing this? I'm trying to protect you. Patricia's voice dripped false sympathy. I know you were desperate for love, 40 years old, crippled. No prospects. Of course you'd fall for the first handsome man who paid attention to you. But Gina, he's using you. That's not true. Isn't it? You're an accountant, a perfect front for laundering money. Or maybe you're just his charity project, his good deed to balance out all the terrible things he does. Patricia leaned forward. When was the last time he told you the truth about anything? His job? His associates? What he does when he's not playing knight in shining armor? Every strange moment came flooding back. The phone calls he took in other rooms, the nervous respect from strangers, the way he'd deflected every question about his work with vague answers about import-export, the expensive lifestyle that didn't match his explanations. He said he'd pay for your surgery, didn't he? Patricia's voice was gentle now, sympathetic. Of course he did. That's how they work, Gina. They find vulnerable people and they exploit them, make them dependent. And you, God, you made it so easy for him. Get out. Gina's voice cracked. I'm sorry. I know this hurts. But better to know now than... Get out. Patricia left, but the folder stayed behind. Gina stared at it like it was a live grenade. She should throw it away. Should trust Brian. Should give him a chance to explain. Instead, she looked through every photograph, read every report, watched her fairy tale disintegrate page by page. Brian arrived at 7:30, holding roses and wearing that smile that usually made her forget her own name. Tonight, it just looked like a lie. You look beautiful, he said, then registered her expression. What's wrong? Gina threw the folder at him. Photographs scattered across her floor like evidence at a crime scene. Tell me my stepmother is lying. Brian's face went carefully, devastatingly blank. He looked at the photos, then at her, and something died in his eyes. Gina, tell me you're not involved with criminals. Her voice was shaking. Tell me this is all some horrible mistake. Tell me something, Brian. Because right now I feel like the stupidest woman alive. It's complicated. That's not an answer. I can't. He ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked lost. I can't tell you what you want to hear. The admission hit like a physical blow. So it's true. All of it. You're Mafia. I can explain if you just listen. Explain what? That you've been lying to me for 3 months? Gina's voice climbed. That everything, the dates, the promises, the talk about a future was all just part of some game? Was Patricia right? Am I your charity project? Your good deed to balance out all the illegal things you do? That's not. Brian moved toward her, then stopped when she flinched. The hurt on his face would have broken her heart if her heart wasn't already shattered. My feelings for you are real. That was never a lie. How would I even know? Gina was crying now, couldn't stop. You've lied about everything else. Your job, your life, who you really are. Did you laugh about it? Poor, desperate Gina, so pathetic she'd fall for anyone who showed her basic kindness. Don't. His voice was sharp. Don't you dare diminish what we have. What do we have, Brian? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I have a stranger in my apartment. A criminal. Someone I don't know at all. You know me better than anyone. He was pleading now, and it was somehow worse than anger. The man who brings you coffee. Who sits through terrible rom-coms at 2 a.m. Who thinks you're the most extraordinary person he's ever met. That's real, Gina. That's me. I don't believe you. The words hung between them like a death sentence. Brian's face crumpled, then smoothed into something hard and unreadable. What can I do? He asked quietly. Tell me what I can do to fix this. You can leave. Gina, get out of my apartment. Get out of my life. She was sobbing now, ugly and broken. I survived my first boyfriend leaving me. I survived my stepmother's cruelty. I'll survive this too. But I can't. I can't look at you right now. Please just go. If you'd let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You're exactly what these photos say you are. A liar. A criminal. Someone who used me. She met his eyes, saw real fear there, and felt a vicious satisfaction. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Did you think you could just play pretend forever? It wasn't pretend. Brian's voice broke. God, Gina. It was the only real thing. You were the only real thing. I don't care. The lie tasted like ash. I want you gone. Now. He stared at her for a long moment, and she saw him make some kind of decision. Saw the exact second he gave up. I love you, he said quietly. I know you don't believe me. I know I don't deserve for you to believe me, but it's true. And if you ever, his voice caught, if you ever want to know the whole truth, call me, please. Then he was gone. The roses lay abandoned on her table, already starting to wilt. Gina sat in her wheelchair in the middle of her tiny apartment, surrounded by photographs of the man she'd loved, the man she'd thought she'd loved, meeting with criminals and exchanging money and living a life she'd never been part of. Patricia had been right. Of course she'd been right. 40-year-old women in wheelchairs didn't get fairy tale romances. They got humiliated on blind dates and pitied by strangers and used by criminals who needed accountants. She'd been so stupid. So desperately, pathetically stupid. Gina's phone buzzed. A text from Brian. I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved honesty. You deserved better than what I could give you. But I meant every word. Every single one. She deleted it without responding. Then she called Denise and sobbed for 2 hours straight, while her friend made sympathetic noises and promised to bring ice cream. Men are trash, Denise declared. Especially handsome ones who seem perfect. They're always hiding something. I should have known, Gina hiccuped. It was too good to be true. Don't do that. Don't blame yourself for believing in something good. Denise's voice was fierce. He's the one who lied. He's the one who broke this. Not you, but it felt like her fault. Felt like she'd been complicit in her own destruction by wanting so badly to be loved that she'd ignored every warning sign. That night, Gina lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her new dress still hanging on the door, a reminder of the dinner that never happened, the anniversary that didn't matter anymore. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Brian. She turned it off without reading it. Across town, Patricia poured herself a glass of wine and smiled at her reflection. Finally, Gina was back where she belonged, broken, alone, dependent. The natural order was restored. She had no idea what she'd actually done. No idea that the man she'd painted as a criminal was actually the only person standing between Gina and the truth about her own past. And Brian, sitting in his sterile penthouse with his phone in his hand, made a decision. He couldn't tell Gina the truth. Not yet. Not while the operation was still active. But he could protect her, even if she hated him. Even if she never spoke to him again. Some promises you kept even when they broke your heart. He called Morrison. We need to move up the timeline. And I need everything you have on Patricia Campbell. Everything. You're compromising the operation, Morrison warned. I don't care. Brian's voice was cold. Find out what she's hiding. There's something there. Something that connects to Gina's accident. I can feel it. This isn't part of the job. I know. Brian looked at the roses he'd brought home, now dying in their wrapper. But she is. The pieces were all moving. The truth was coming. But first, Gina would have to survive the worst heartbreak of her life, and wonder if love had ever been real at all. 2 weeks felt like 2 years. Gina stopped answering her phone after day 3, when Brian's messages went from apologetic to desperate to finally, devastatingly, silent. Denise had confiscated her wine after she'd drunk an entire bottle while watching their text history and crying. Work became mechanical numbers that meant nothing, spreadsheets that blurred together, clients whose problems felt insignificant compared to the crater in her chest. Patricia, naturally, was everywhere. She showed up Monday with croissants and coffee, her face arranged in sympathetic lines that didn't quite hide her satisfaction. I know it hurts now, sweetheart, but you'll see I saved you from something much worse. Tuesday brought muffins and more platitudes. Men like that, they're dangerous. You're better off. Wednesday, it was scones. Thursday, bagels. By Friday, Gina wanted to throw the pastries at Patricia's head. "You don't have to keep coming," Gina said, her voice flat. "I'm fine." "Of course you're not fine. Your heart is broken." Patricia settled onto the couch like she belonged there. "But that's what I'm here for. Family supports each other through hard times." Family. The word was a joke. Patricia had never been family. She'd been a warden, a tormentor, a constant reminder that Gina was unwanted and unworthy. But Gina was too tired to fight, so she nodded and let Patricia prattle on about how she'd always known Brian was trouble. But something gnawed at Gina, something that didn't fit. Brian had never denied it. When she'd confronted him, when she demanded he tell her Patricia was lying, he'd said, "I can't tell you that. Not you're wrong," or "That's not true." He'd said he couldn't tell her. That was different, wasn't it? "Stop overthinking it," Denise had said when Gina mentioned it. He lied. That's all that matters. But it did matter. It mattered that his face had looked genuinely devastated. That his last words had been, "I love you," and not excuses. That he'd left without trying to manipulate or convince or defend himself beyond that one broken plea for her to listen. Gina hated that it mattered. Hated that part of her still wanted to believe in the man who'd brought her coffee and watched terrible movies and looked at her like she was extraordinary. She was spiraling through these thoughts for the 100th time when someone knocked on her door Saturday morning. Patricia again, probably, with more baked goods and false sympathy. Gina opened it and found a stranger instead. Tall, African-American, maybe 50, with tired eyes and a badge clipped to his belt. "Miss Campbell? I'm Special Agent Morrison, FBI." He showed her credentials that looked official and terrifying. "I need to talk to you about Brian Bianco. May I come in?" Gina's stomach dropped into her feet. "If you're here to investigate me because of his criminal..." "Criminal?" Morrison's eyebrows shot up. Then his expression shifted through confusion to understanding to what looked like anger. "Oh, hell. His cover's blown with you." He ran a hand over his face. "May I come in? This is going to take some explaining." Gina let him in because she didn't know what else to do. Her brain was stuck on the word cover, turning it over and over like a Rubik's Cube she couldn't solve. Morrison sat in the chair, Patricia usually claimed, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Miss Campbell, I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you is classified information. Normally I wouldn't be here at all, but Brian..." He stopped, seeming to reconsider. "Let me start over. What exactly do you think Brian Bianco is?" "Mafia." The word tasted bitter. "My stepmother showed me photographs. Him with known criminals exchanging money, entering buildings under FBI surveillance. She said he's part of the Rossi crime family." "Your stepmother is partially correct. He does work with the Rossi family." Morrison leaned forward. "Because he's been undercover for 3 years trying to dismantle them from the inside. Brian Bianco isn't Mafia, Miss Campbell. He's one of ours. He's a detective. One of the best I've ever worked with." The room tilted. Gina gripped the arms of her wheelchair. "What?" 3 years ago, we recruited Brian for a deep cover operation. The Rossis are involved in everything from illegal items to human trafficking to financial crimes that span multiple countries. We needed someone on the inside, someone they'd believe, someone who could become part of their world. Morrison's voice was matter-of-fact, professional. Brian built an entire life as one of them. The divorce was real, his ex-wife couldn't handle it. The reputation, the associations, the money, all carefully constructed to make the Rossis trust him. Gina couldn't breathe. He's not a criminal. He's the furthest thing from it. The man works 80-hour weeks building a case that's going to put some very dangerous people away for life. Morrison pulled out his phone, showed her a photo of Brian in a police uniform from years ago. Young, clean-cut, wearing a badge and a smile that looked nothing like the man she knew. That's who Brian really is. A cop, a good one. But the photos are real. He does meet with criminals. He does handle money. That's his job. That's what undercover means. Morrison's expression softened slightly. He's been living a lie for 3 years, Miss Campbell. But you were the truth. The only real thing in his entire constructed life. Gina's hands started shaking. He couldn't tell me. No. He violated about 15 protocols just by getting involved with you in the first place. Morrison smiled grimly. I told him he was being reckless. That he was compromising the operation. You know what he said? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. He said you were worth it. That if it came down to you or the operation, he'd burn his whole career without thinking twice. Morrison stood. The operation's wrapping up. We're moving in on the Rossis within the week. After that, Brian can tell you everything himself. But I'm here because he's been a mess for 2 weeks, and I'm tired of watching a good man destroy himself." "Why are you telling me this?" Gina whispered. "Because he won't. Because he's got this idiotic sense of honor that won't let him defend himself if it means exposing the operation. And because," Morrison moved toward the door, "because I've been doing this job for 25 years, and I've never seen anyone look at another person the way he looks at you. Not in photos on his desk. In his eyes when he talks about you. That kind of love is rare, Miss Campbell. Seemed like you should know it's real before you throw it away." He left. Gina sat frozen in her wheelchair, her entire understanding of reality crumbling and reforming. Brian wasn't a criminal. He was a detective. Everything, the secretiveness, the strange associations, the careful deflections, it was all because he was undercover. He hadn't been lying to her, he'd been protecting her, protecting an operation that could save lives. And she'd thrown him out. Told him she didn't believe him. Said his love wasn't real. Oh God. The grief that had been sitting on her chest for 2 weeks transformed into something else. Shame, first. Then confusion. Then, as she thought about Patricia, something much darker. Patricia had known. Or at least, she'd wanted Gina to believe the worst possible interpretation. She'd hired an investigator, gathered evidence, and presented it in the most damaging way possible. She'd known exactly how to frame it, exactly which insecurities to target. Patricia had destroyed Gina's relationship on purpose. Gina pulled out the folder, looking at the photographs with new eyes. They were real, but they weren't what Patricia had claimed. They were a man doing his job, a dangerous, complicated, noble job, and Patricia had weaponized them. Why? The question circled in Gina's mind, and suddenly she was thinking about other things. About the accident that had put her in this wheelchair. Patricia's car. Patricia driving. They'd been arguing about Gina's boyfriend, her first boyfriend, the one who'd loved her before the accident. "You're distracting me," Patricia had screamed, and then they'd swerved into oncoming traffic. But had Gina been distracting her? Or had Patricia? No, that was crazy. Patricia was cruel, but she wouldn't. Except she would. Gina knew she would. Knew it in her bones. In the way Patricia had smiled when she'd shown her those photographs. In the way she'd been visiting every day with pastries and sympathy that felt like gloating. Patricia didn't want Gina happy. She wanted Gina broken and dependent and alone. The grief transformed into white-hot fury. Gina grabbed her phone and called Brian. It went to voicemail. His voice, professional and distant. "You've reached Brian Bianco. Leave a message." "It's me," she said, her voice shaking. Morrison came by. I know everything, and I'm so sorry. I should have listened. I should have trusted you. Please call me back, please." She hung up and immediately called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. He wasn't answering. Why wasn't he answering? Panic clawed at her throat. What if she'd ruined this beyond repair? What if he'd meant what he'd said, that he loved her but couldn't forgive her for not believing him? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Morrison. Brian's in the field. Radio silent for the next 72 hours. Operation's going down tonight. He'll call you when he can. And Miss Campbell? He's been carrying a ring in his pocket for 3 weeks. Just thought you should know." Gina stared at the message until the words blurred. A ring. Brian had been planning to propose, and she'd told him to get out of her life. The fury came roaring back, but this time it had a target. Patricia. Patricia, who'd orchestrated all of this, who'd destroyed Gina's happiness because she couldn't stand to see her stepdaughter loved. Patricia, who might have done much worse than that. Gina opened her laptop and started searching. News reports from 15 years ago. The accident. Police reports. She'd never looked before the memories were too painful, and Patricia had always controlled the narrative. But now she looked, and what she found made her blood run cold. There had been witnesses. People who'd reported that the car had swerved deliberately, not accidentally. That the driver had seemed angry, had been yelling. The investigation had been dropped when Patricia claimed Gina had grabbed the wheel. Gina, who'd been too traumatized to remember clearly, who'd believed Patricia's version because what else could she do? But there were statements, depositions, evidence that had been buried. Patricia had lied about the accident, had maybe probably caused it on purpose. Gina's hands trembled as she kept digging. Bank records she shouldn't have been able to access but could because she was an accountant and knew how to look. Patricia's finances showed regular payments to someone named Richard Chen, A private investigator. The same one she'd hired to dig up dirt on Brian. But the payments went back years. What else had Patricia been investigating? Who else had she been watching? Gina's first boyfriend, the one who'd left her after the accident. Payments to Chen right before he'd broken up with her. Had Patricia paid him off? Threatened him? Made sure Gina would be alone? The pattern was there, clear as day once she knew to look for it. Every time Gina had gotten close to happiness, Patricia had been there to destroy it. Every time. The grief was gone now. Only rage remained. Pure, crystalline, righteous rage. Patricia wanted Gina dependent, broken, alone. Well, that was about to end. Gina called Morrison back. I need your help with something. My stepmother, there's evidence she deliberately caused the accident that paralyzed me. I have statements, records, everything. Can you send them to me? Morrison said immediately. If there's a case there, we'll pursue it. Thank you. Miss Campbell? Brian's going to be fine. The operation's solid. And when he gets back, Morrison paused. He's going to need you. This life, the undercover work, it takes a toll. He's been alone for 3 years. Don't let him be alone anymore. I won't, Gina promised. I swear I won't. She spent the next 72 hours compiling evidence, sending it to Morrison, and waiting for Brian to call. Patricia came by twice more, but Gina didn't let her in. Didn't want to see her face until she knew Brian was safe and the truth was out. On the 3rd day, her phone rang. Brian's number. Gina answered on the first ring. Brian, it's over. His voice sounded exhausted, raw. The operation. It's done. The Rossis are in custody. I'm out. Are you okay? I don't know. A long pause. Morrison said he talked to you. He did. Brian, I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you. Should have let you explain. I was scared and stupid and... You weren't stupid. You were protecting yourself. His voice cracked slightly. I lied to you, Gina. Maybe not about my feelings, but about everything else. You had every right to. I love you, Gina interrupted. I love you, and I was wrong, and I need to see you. Please. Silence. Then, I'm coming over. Right now. Don't move. He hung up. Gina sat in her apartment, heart pounding, waiting for the man she loved to come back to her, and planning exactly what she was going to say to Patricia when this was all over. The truth was coming. For everyone. Gina didn't wait for Brian to come to her. The moment she hung up, she called an Uber and headed to his penthouse, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. When he opened the door, she almost didn't recognize him. Brian looked like he hadn't slept in days, stubble darkening his jaw, hair disheveled, still wearing what looked like the same clothes from the operation. But his eyes, God, his eyes lit up when he saw her. Hope and fear and love all tangled together. You're a detective, Gina said. I couldn't tell you. The operation. Shut up and kiss me. He did. Pulled her right out of her wheelchair and into his arms, kissing her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning for weeks. Gina wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with everything she had, 3 weeks of grief and regret and desperate love pouring into that single moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Brian pressed his forehead against hers. I'm so sorry. For all of it. For not being able to explain. For letting you think. I'm the one who's sorry. I should have trusted you. Should have listened instead of just... Her voice cracked. Morrison told me about the ring. Brian pulled back slightly, his expression shifting to something vulnerable. He had no right. He had every right. I needed to know. Gina cupped his face. I need to know everything now. No more secrets. No more lies. So he told her. Everything. About the 3 years spent becoming someone else. Building trust with people who dealt in nightmares. Watching terrible things happen because stopping them too soon would blow his cover. About the divorce that had broken him. Emily couldn't handle the man he'd become. Couldn't separate the role from reality. And then I saw you, Brian said quietly. They were on his couch now. Gina pulled close against his side. In that restaurant, holding your head up while that idiot humiliated you. And I couldn't walk away. Even though I should have. Even though it was reckless and stupid and violated every protocol. I'm glad you were reckless, Gina said. I'm glad you were stupid. Morrison would agree with you. He's been lecturing me for 3 months. Brian's arms tightened around her. I was going to tell you everything. Once the operation wrapped, Once I could be just Brian again, and not whoever I've been pretending to be. I had it all planned. Dinner at that terrible Italian place you love, the ring, the truth, everything. And then Patricia ruined it. Yeah. His voice went cold. Speaking of which, Morrison mentioned, you sent him information about your stepmother? Gina pulled back to look at him. My stepmother is responsible for more than you know. Then she told him everything. About the accident that wasn't an accident. About 15 years of psychological torture. About Patricia's pathological need to keep Gina broken and dependent and alone. Brian's expression went progressively darker as she talked. By the time she finished, his jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. She caused your accident deliberately, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. She's been sabotaging your happiness for 15 years. She destroyed us, tried to destroy us because she couldn't stand to see you loved. Yes. And you have evidence? Witness statements, financial records, bank transfers to the investigator she used. Everything. Gina met his eyes. I want her to pay, Brian. Not just for what she did to us. For all of it. Brian stood, pulling out his phone. Let me make some calls. What he set in motion over the next 48 hours was beautiful, terrible justice. Morrison's team reopened the accident investigation. Witnesses who'd been ignored 15 years ago suddenly had federal agents taking their statements seriously. Patricia's financial records revealed not just the payments to the investigator, but evidence of bribes money paid to the officer who'd closed Gina's case, to the insurance adjuster who'd ruled it driver error on Gina's part. The toxicology report from the hospital the night of the accident, the one that had mysteriously disappeared from official records, turned up in storage. Patricia's blood alcohol level had been well over the legal limit. She'd been drunk, angry, and she'd swerved deliberately into oncoming traffic, then blamed Gina for grabbing the wheel. Criminal charges followed: vehicular assault, insurance fraud, obstruction of justice, witness tampering. The DA was building a case that would put Patricia away for years. But Brian's greatest gift to Gina wasn't revenge. 3 days after the operation wrapped, he took her to meet Dr. Catherine Sullivan, the country's leading orthopedic surgeon, the woman who'd pioneered the procedure that could restore function to Gina's legs. Your stepmother wanted to keep you dependent on her, Brian said, holding Gina's hand in the consultation room. Let's take that power away, permanently. Dr. Sullivan was confident. The damage is old but not irreparable. With surgery and aggressive physical therapy, I'd estimate 60 to 70% restoration of function. You'll likely always need mobility aids for long distances. But daily activities? Walking? That's absolutely achievable. How much? Gina asked, because she had to know. Brian squeezed her hand. Already handled. Consider it a very early wedding present. Gina turned to stare at him. Wedding present? He pulled the ring from his pocket. Simple, elegant, perfect. I know it's fast. I know we've been through hell. But Gina Campbell, I have spent 3 years being someone I'm not, and the only time I've felt like myself is when I'm with you. Will you marry me? She said yes. Obviously said yes. Said it while crying and laughing and kissing him all at once. The surgery happened 2 weeks later. It was brutal 8 hours, then another 4 when complications arose. But Dr. Sullivan was a miracle worker, and when Gina woke up in recovery, Brian was there, holding her hand. Welcome back, he said softly. Dr. Sullivan says it went perfectly. Physical therapy was torture. Gina had forgotten what it felt like to use her legs, and teaching her muscles to remember was agony. But Brian was there for every session, encouraging her, celebrating tiny victories, holding her when she cried from frustration. I can't do this, she sobbed after a particularly brutal day, where she'd managed 3 steps before collapsing. You already did 3 steps, Brian corrected. Yesterday you did 2. Tomorrow you'll do 4. And in 3 months, you're going to walk down an aisle and marry me. He was right. 3 months later, at the courthouse, because neither of them wanted anything elaborate or performative, Gina walked to meet her future husband. Actually walked, with only a cane for support, wearing a simple white dress and the biggest smile of her life. Brian had arranged one special guest via video feed, Patricia, watching from her prison cell. He'd wanted her to see that she'd lost, that every cruel thing she'd done had led to nothing but her own destruction. Gina barely glanced at the screen. Patricia didn't matter anymore. The vows were simple but devastating. You saw me when I was invisible, Gina said, her voice steady and strong. You valued me when I felt worthless. You didn't save me, Brian. You reminded me I was always worth saving. You taught me that love isn't about fixing someone or completing them. It's about seeing them exactly as they are and choosing them anyway. I choose you, every day, every version of you. Brian's voice was rough with emotion. You taught me that the best undercover work is letting someone see who you really are. For 3 years, I lived a lie. But with you, I got to be honest, real, human. You didn't fall in love with a detective or a role or an image. You fell in love with me, the messy, complicated, occasionally reckless me. I love you, Gina, every stubborn, brilliant, beautiful part of you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice saying yes to me. They were both crying by the time they kissed as husband and wife. The reception was small, just Denise, Morrison, Leo, Dr. Sullivan, and a handful of close friends. Someone had set up a playlist, and when the first slow song came on, Brian led Gina to the makeshift dance floor. She managed to stand for most of the song, swaying in his arms, feeling his heartbeat against her cheek. But halfway through, her legs started trembling, and she needed to sit. Brian immediately wheeled over her chair, the same one from that first restaurant encounter, which she'd kept as a reminder of where they'd started, and helped her into it. Then he knelt beside her, taking her hands. You don't have to kneel. Gina laughed, though tears were streaming down her face. I can still dance sitting down. I'm not kneeling because of the chair, Brian said, his eyes locked on hers. I'm kneeling because you're royalty, and I'm the lucky fool who gets to spend his life with you. You're such a sap, Gina said, pulling him up to kiss her. You're sap now. You're stuck with me. Good. They danced the rest of the song with Brian kneeling, then sitting on the floor beside her chair, both of them laughing like idiots in love. Because that's what they were. Idiots in love who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and refused to let go. Across town, Patricia sat in her cell, staring at the wall. The video feed had been cut off right after the vows, but she'd seen enough. Seen Gina walking, seen her happy, seen her loved by a man who looked at her like she hung the moon. The jealousy ate at Patricia, like acid. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. Gina was supposed to be broken, dependent, alone. That was justice for all the years Patricia had sacrificed, playing mother to someone else's child, trapped in a marriage to a man who'd never stopped loving his dead wife. But Patricia's bitterness didn't matter anymore. Her jealousy was impotent, powerless. She'd played her cruelest cards and lost everything. Meanwhile, at the reception, Gina wasn't thinking about her stepmother at all. She was dancing with her husband, sometimes standing, sometimes sitting. It didn't matter. She was laughing at Leo's terrible attempt at a wedding toast. She was thanking Dr. Sullivan for giving her back her independence. She was planning a honeymoon with Brian somewhere tropical where they could both forget about undercover operations and family trauma and just be together. She was free. Finally, completely, beautifully free. What are you thinking? Brian asked, still sitting on the floor beside her chair, his hand warm in hers. That I'm glad Chad was a terrible human being, Gina said. Because if he hadn't humiliated me, you never would have intervened, and I never would have found you. Worst best thing that ever happened to you. Something like that. She squeezed his hand. Thank you, for being reckless, for breaking protocol, for choosing me. Always, Brian said. Every single time, I choose you. They stayed like that for a long moment, Gina in her wheelchair, Brian on the floor beside her, surrounded by people who loved them and felt like the luckiest people alive. Because love, real love, wasn't about fairy tales or perfect endings. It was about choosing each other through the messy, complicated, sometimes devastating reality of being human. And they'd choose each other, every day, no matter what. The end and the beginning. Did justice get served or what? Hit that like if you're celebrating Gina's victory. Let's always remember that we are worthy of love. Please be part of our empowering community by kindly subscribing for more emotional but yet empowering, motivating romances. Thank you.